Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by Jon Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Curcuruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. Jon and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, Jon and Jim.
Welcome to another episode of Connecting with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of conservation in our country. I'm Jon Gassett, your co-host with Connecting with Conservation and with Wildlife Management Institute. I'm here with my fellow co-host, Jim Curcuruto from Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. Jim, are you staying warm down there in South Carolina? It's kind of chilly up here.
Yeah, it's been an interesting pre-spring. It's either 20 or 70. So take your pick, one day one, the other day the other. But sooner or later, it'll all be nice. The flowers will be popping up soon and getting outside more and more. Looking forward to maybe casting a line one of these days. But
it's not 24 inches of snow like your previous state just got. So
I don't miss the Northeast right now. I feel bad for some of those folks shuffling, but again, getting outside, there's so many things to do and talk about, and talking about all the stories that we tell, are important to get out to the masses, and nobody does that better than the outdoor media. We got thousands of great writers and podcasters and all sorts of communicators for the outdoor industry, and today I'm happy to have old friend of mine on, Kevin Paulson, who's been in the media industry for quite some time. I've got him listed as with AGLOW and Hunting Life and Outdoor Hive, so he can tell us a little bit about what's going on in the world of media. So welcome, Kevin, and why don't you give us a little background on you and who you're working with, and then we'll get into, what's going on in the media world.
That sounds fantastic. I started my career doing litigation photocopying for law firms in downtown Washington, D.C. And, working for law firms, we were making a little bit of money, and I started basically tithing to wildlife, working with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Safari Club, Ducks Unlimited, giving them, a portion of my income. I gave basically 10% of everything I made for about 10 years to those conservation organizations. And in the process of doing that, I invested in an outfitting business. I tell people it was my worst mistake ever in my entire life. I bought into an outfitting business in Idaho and Montana. I'm living in Washington, D.C., and I ran all the marketing for that outfitting agency. And then I would go out there and occasionally guide in the Idaho side. And, through that process, I lost my father. And when I did, it was like, I got to make a tremendous number of changes in my life. And one of them was immediately selling the outfitting business. But I bought huntinglife.com the very next day. And my original goal was to build an outfitter directory for the entire country as huntinglife.com. And it was 2007 to 2009. We literally bought the business in 2006. And we launched the website in 2007. So we're going on 20 years right now. And as a part of that process of building the outfitter directory, we went through an economic downturn, and outfitters lost basically most of their revenue. And in fact, probably half of the outfitters that were in business across America went out of business. And so during that, I was like, well, we should probably pivot. And pivoted Hunting Life into being a national news source for hunting and conservation. And we basically tell people, like, we're a source that helps to spread the message of the North American conservation model. And really that's, who we want to be and what we want to be about. And so we, continue to pivot and continue to grow. We provide a news feed of all of the news things that's going on in the entire industry, everything from shooting and hunting to the conservation organizations to the archery industry and a little bit of fishing. And we do a lot of gear reviews and YouTube videos. We're getting ready to launch a podcast platform of several podcasts focused on hunting and conservation across the entire country. And we produce a magazine that's a digital flipbook magazine 4 times a year that allows young writers the opportunity to come on board and really, show people who they are and what they're made of, as well as some like old, veterans of the outdoor industry, guys like Wayne Manswall and Craig Boddington, and we'll have some articles from some of those guys as well. But we're really trying to focus really on the younger writers as much as we possibly can, and getting that out. About a year and a half ago, I started an outdoor newsletter called Outdoor Hive, and that newsletter is focused on employment in the outdoor industry. And we can talk about that a little bit later. And then at about the same time, I got hired on as the executive director for AGLOW. And AGLOW is currently the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers. We say all lakes are Great Lakes. And we're a nationwide organization of outdoor content creators that's been around since 1956. And AGLOW was created with a bunch of small guys that were newspaper columnists all across the Great Lakes region. And they formed a coalition of people that kind of came together to basically help them improve their craft and be able to help them grow as outdoor writers. And some of those guys are legends today. If you look at the freshwater fishing Hall of Fame, there's 400 inductees, and I think 56 of them are AGLOW members. And so it's pretty cool to look at some of those guys that, these are guys that are just absolute legends. And getting the chance to step in and help run this organization, it's just, like I said, it's a legendary opportunity for me.
Yeah, I was already wondering about the connection between Nebraska and the Great Lakes. It's like it's a little bit removed from there, but
we really are a nationwide organization.
Yeah.
And we are the oldest hook and bullet organization in the country. Of all of kind of the writing organizations that are out there, we're the oldest hook and bullet one.
My WMI counterpart, who is former deputy director in Michigan, likes to say that 6 out of 7 Great Lakes prefer Michigan, because more of them touch Michigan than the other states. But it is a great resource up there. I'm scheduled to go with him for walleye this spring, so we'll see how that goes. It's a little hard water up there right now, and I'm a Southern boy. As somebody told me one time, only Jesus and Bear Bryant walks on water. And I ain't either one of those, so I don't get on the ice.
Well, I have yet to go ice fishing in my life. It is like really actually very high on my bucket list. I've been watching pictures this week of some of our members who are at Lake Winnebago, and they're doing the sturgeon spearing. And they're hit record numbers this year. It's like they actually will top out maybe close to 1,200 sturgeon this year. So pretty cool, kind of a cool story.
Yeah, and that's, again, there's so many cool stories about hunting, fishing, trapping, and shooting, and all things you can do outdoors. And without having, the outdoor writers, we're not able to get this message not only to fellow hats, hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters, but to the general population. You said you've got newspaper, folks, and I remember growing up and just reading the outdoor writer section in my local newspaper, but everybody could see it. It wasn't just for outdoors folks. So I guess talk a little bit about the importance of communicating the messages and the stories that are out there, like to the masses.
Well, I mean, hunters have been telling their stories for tens of thousands of years. We started, telling the stories of great hunting adventures on the sides of rock walls and caves. And, still you can go down to the deserts of Arizona and Utah, et cetera, and you can see those petroglyphs on the side of the wall that, people put up their hunting stories. Without great storytelling across the entire spectrum of hunting, fishing, archery, shooting, et cetera, our industry kind of dwindles in a lot of ways because people don't get to hear about it. Our population as a whole only, maybe 10% hunt and, 20% participate in fishing at least once a year. And when you look at those numbers, those are pretty low. And so the only way to really grow hunting and fishing across the entire spectrum is through the process of great storytelling. And that storytelling has changed, dramatically over the past, over my lifetime for sure. And, over probably the last 100 years. First it was books, and then you had the launch of Field and Stream and Outdoor Life and magazines like that, Sportsman's Afield. And now some of those magazines are no longer around. And so you're starting to see that newspapers today don't have an outdoor column on a weekly basis. And so that's really starting to hurt. And while you've seen guys like myself come along and start to blog, and you've got podcasters out there and YouTubers out there and videographers that are creating films now that are really making a big difference. And the landscape has changed dramatically. And that's one of the things that I'm very proud of AGLOW, because we've done a really good job of recruiting members across that entire broad spectrum.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because really the way we consume news has changed, over the last 2 or 3 decades. I can't even remember the last time I held an actual newspaper in my hand. I read my news with a news aggregator on an iPad, and everything else is 135 character tweets or whatever. That's the way people seem to like to. It's almost that they want the soundbite, and if they're interested, they'll go get more. But you got to hook them first. And before, you used to read the newspaper from cover to cover, like Jim said, just go right to the outdoor section and see what you needed to see. But it's a different world out there now.
Yeah, I miss my newspaper. I still get the Wall Street Journal on a daily basis. Well, actually, I don't get it on Mondays, but because we don't have delivery on Mondays for some reason. But, Tuesday through Sunday, I get the papers, and I still read them. But that, there has very few outdoor, related articles in the Wall Street Journal. And as far as like the local paper, I don't know, my paper here in Lincoln, Nebraska, I'm sorry, it's trash. It's terrible. So it's frustrating. And so, yeah, I look at, local YouTube groups or Facebook groups or, bloggers to get information about what's going on in Nebraska wildlife. And I look at, people I know to get information across the entire spectrum. Podcasts I listen to quite a bit and learn from, and also, people's blogs and websites.
Yeah, and I know you guys, one of the important things to do is there's so many trade shows. I mean, whether it's the conservation groups, the consumer shows, or the business-to-business shows like the SHOT Show and the Archery Trade Show, but they're always filled with media. I think there was 2,500 or more media at SHOT Show this year. So talk about the importance of networking and going to these trade shows as communicators.
Yeah, as an individual in the media, for me, going to SHOT Show, I went to SHOT Show, I went to ATA this year, SHOT Show, I went to the Western Hunt Conservation Expo in Salt Lake, and I just got back from SCI. I think I'm on hiatus for a little bit until ICAST. I'll probably run out to the Iowa Deer Classic, just because it's a big consumer show, and I want to see the companies that are specifically targeting the consumers that are different than the companies that are targeting, like retail, like SHOT Show, etc. These shows are incredibly important to my career because it gives me belly-to-belly time to network with those individuals in those companies and be able to create those relationships all the way across the entire board. At SHOT Show, I run close to 65 meetings from Sunday afternoon all the way through Friday afternoon at 3:00. And those meetings are, I start at, 6 a.m. at breakfast at the Grand Lux Cafe in the Venetian, and I work my way into the press room at 7 a.m. when it opens. I'll run an hour and a half of meetings inside the press room, trying to connect with as many people as I can there. And then I start meeting with manufacturers on the floor almost immediately after that. I attend as many networking events as I possibly can through the evenings. Some of those are small dinners, and some of those are bigger events that, you just go in and you've got to work the room and try and meet as many people as you can and talk to as many influencers. For me, I'm trying to recruit, on 3 different levels. I'm talking to HR people for Outdoor Hive. I'm talking to marketing folks for Hunting Life, as well as for AGLOW, bringing those corporate members into AGLOW. And I'm meeting with as many media people as humanly possible to help them connect with me and telling them the story of why they should join AGLOW and how important that can be to their career.
Yeah. So what are some recent stories that you've got from all your travels, that you're putting on Hunting Life and some of the other places?
Well, I just spent a tremendous amount of time this last week at the Western Hunt Conservation Expo, and then I literally flew home for a couple of days and was at SCI. The story that really interests me, that I'm very excited and getting ready to, kind of put out there. Boone and Crockett just did a phenomenal study on poaching, and really getting to kind of like what's going on in that regard. So that's a story that I'm working on for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've got the guy that ran it, that did all the work for it.
My wife and I are the lead researchers on the poaching pay study. So
Okay, well, there you go. So
and did the research. Yep.
And definitely that's super important to write about, because when it came out 6 months ago, there was a big flurry of news on it. But I mean, it's a great topic to write on. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, what you guys come up with there.
yeah, I'm working with Boone and Crockett, and we'll have a story in this next issue of the magazine. And I'm incredibly excited to be able to have that, in our magazine and out there for readers. I mean, I think those numbers are incredibly shocking, and, I think we need to get that information out as much as we can.
Yeah, I agree completely. I told Boone and Crockett when we started this, I said, all of this will be for nothing if we can't convey it, to the hunting and angling public, to our users, and to the general public, really. Hunters and anglers don't comprise enough of our communities anymore to have the kind of influence where if you get the general public pissed off about illegal take of wildlife, things will change, just like they did with DUI laws from 30 or 40 years ago to now. It used to be, it was illegal and you did it, but it was no big deal. And now you're embarrassed and ostracized, and your neighbors won't talk to you. And, how do we get poaching on that level? And we've got to get there with that. So if you're looking for any deeper dives into the data on that, you holler anytime. I can hook you up. There's so much stuff to be mined out of that report that we couldn't put in the comprehensive report, just because nobody's going to read 17 volumes of I can't even remember how many records we went through, but hundreds of thousands of citations, 8 states. And then on the survey side, we sent 80,000 surveys out to hunters, 80,000 to landowners, and then every conservation officer knows 8 states. So there's a tremendous amount of information that still yet to be unearthed.
Yeah, well, and I'm hoping it can bring about some change, because, like, I know here in Nebraska, I hunt a western section of Nebraska. I say it's filled with sand hills, but it's not the sand hill section. And in that same token, we have one conservation officer for 4 counties that compile 70 by 80 miles. There's no way that one individual is able to crack the case on the poaching incidents that are happening, and it's frustrating. We have some local law enforcement that are out there during the 9-day hunting season, but I know there's plenty of things that are happening.
There's
that
a lot
need to be addressed.
A lot of the stuff's happening outside of that 9-day season. And the record I had in our study, one lady officer I interviewed or surveyed, she covered 7,000 square miles. It's like, you can't cover that with an airplane, and 3 officers. There's just no way. It's just too big.
Yeah. No, that's frustrating. I remember, doing a story probably 10 years ago, with an author that was a California game enforcement officer, and he wrote a book. Jon, I want to say Gomez, but I know that's wrong. But he was a California game agent for many, many years, and the vast majority of the work that he ended up doing was, marijuana eradication. And he wrote a book about the scarcity of wildlife officers in the state of California. They had, at the time, I would say 250, 300, and they needed almost 1,000. And they couldn't hire them fast enough and train them fast enough and get them. And I think California is probably still in the midst of that same crisis, because I doubt anything has changed in fixing that problem.
But no, it's good to see those stories coming out that kind of clear the record, because if we don't tell our story, the other side that doesn't like hunting loves to connect poaching and hunting. And hunters hate poachers more than anybody hates poachers. They're totally different. they are criminals. It's like, we tell the story about, somebody walks into a grocery store, goes back to the steak section and buys a T-bone steak, for $20 and walks out the door with their receipt. Another person walks in, goes back to the meat section, takes that $20 thing, puts it in his jacket and walks out. That's a criminal, right? Not a customer. They're a criminal. We have hunters that do it legally, and we have criminals that are poachers. So I appreciate you doing that. And again, telling the story and the difference between legal and, criminals. So now, you came into the industry, an interesting way. I did as well. I kind of lucked into a job that I saw in a newspaper or something like that, 15, 18 years ago. But you have Outdoor Hive, kind of makes it a little bit easier. Tell us a little bit about what the Outdoor Hive is and if folks are interested in looking for a job in the outdoor space.
Yeah. So I came into the industry basically grinding my way in. And I mean, I had to beg, borrow, and steal to get a press pass to be able to come to SHOT Show. And, I called people and begged them. And, it was joining a writing association that really helped me to get into, SHOT Show and become a part of this industry. And then as I became a part of the industry, I basically created friendships with people all across the entire industry. And, part of my success in life has been about, helping people connect with other people. And I really see that as my role in this industry, is to be a giant connector all the way across the entire board. So seeing lots of friends, hop and skip from one company to another. You'd see a economic downturn at company B, and company C was hiring. And once you're kind of in this industry, you're working on something that is a business and it is a job that you have to do, but at the same time, it's something that you're incredibly passionate about. I mean, we love, standing around SHOT Show and sharing our pictures of our deer from the year or the big fish we caught or whatever it happens to be, and telling us stories about hunting. We've all become friends over this, over the years. I've shared time with you, Jim, around the campfire at a conference, and I've gotten to know you, and John, hopefully we'll get that opportunity here soon. And as you do those things, you create those relationships that are very, very important. Well, there was no, once you kind of get let go from a company or something happens or that company goes out of business, you want to stay in the industry. There was no good resource out there at all for, job listings to find them. It's not like LinkedIn makes it easy to find great hunting and fishing and shooting jobs. They don't care about our industry at all. And so I created this newsletter to be basically a one-stop resource that comes into your email box every single Wednesday afternoon. It has a small write-up from me about, what's happening in the industry or what I'm seeing, or maybe some job tips or maybe a networking tip or something along that line. Last week, we had 69 jobs that we listed all across the entire industry. Everything from things at conservation organizations to shooting companies to archery companies to sport fishing companies, all the way across the entire board. And then we wrap up with a quick meme and some dad jokes at the end. And I get a lot of comments about the dad jokes, almost more than the job listings. But it's just kind of something fun. And, when you're looking for a job, it's very stressful. And at the same time, I was like, well, how can we make it a little bit of fun? And so, yeah, we add, 5 or 6 dad jokes at the end of our newsletter, and it just gives somebody something to look for, and hopefully gets them to scream through all those job listings and do it week after week. Yeah, so I think everybody in our entire industry should be a subscriber.
Yeah. So you mentioned jobs with conservation NGOs and obviously industry. Does that extend to like agency openings for, in fisheries and wildlife agencies? Or
if I can find the job listings, we'll post them up.
That's the trick with state jobs, is they're not that easy to, they're there, but it's not hard. It's hard to find the actual job description, the job position announcement. They don't advertise them very well. Texas A&M has a job board that does some of that, but nobody knows to go there. And Wildlife Society tries to do some, AFS does, but really there's no one place where you can find a job in the conservation community, but it sounds like there is. I just didn't know about it. So
Yeah, I'm hoping to kind of build that job board as we grow. Right now, we've been running this will be our 77th week tomorrow when we send out the newsletter. And right now we're a completely pro bono, like we're doing this because it's good for the industry. When we step into 2027, we'll start charging companies a little bit of money to list their jobs with us. But as we go down this path, I'm trying to find any other way to be able to make that happen to where we can create a job board and find ways to kind of fund that, because I just think it's so important for the industry.
So just as a follow up, I got a question, and it has occurred to me a couple of times in the past, maybe year or so. But are there any moves that you know of, or maybe y'all think about this, where you could take the information from potential job seekers, I guess, in form of a resume or application or whatever, and use an AI, match them up with, okay, here are 5 jobs you might be interested in. They fit you meet the minimum requirements or whatever. They fit your qualifications. So you sort of pre-filter them, I guess, and shoot them directly to the applicants.
Yeah, no, it's coming. I mean, I think that there's so many big changes in how people find jobs, etc. I will say that, we as an industry, I always tell people like outfitting first and foremost is 10 to 15 years behind the rest of the industries in the world. Um, Hunting and shooting and fishing, we're probably 5 years behind the rest of the industry in a lot of these ways of using AI and all of these things. We're still kind of a good old boys network and good old gals network of, people, and being able to have those relationships with folks. And like, who do you know at, Sig Sauer? Who do you know at Christensen? So, I could, call them about this job and find out if I'm a fit. It is very much, who for sure.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I appreciate you coming on and all that you guys do and all the media telling those great stories. And before I get into where folks can get more information on whether it's the Outdoor Hive or Hunting Life or AGLOW, I want to hear a dad joke. So go ahead and give us one that pops into your head that
You know how at the end of the game they throw the ball into the crowd to celebrate?
yeah.
You can't do that in bowling.
You can try. I like it. Very good. All right.
That was
So
when I got my daughter to laugh at. So
that's good.
that's the one that's top of the mind for the day.
So I guess start with any of the 3, or where can we find more info on all these things?
Absolutely. So Hunting Life is easy. It's huntinglife.com, and we're at Hunting Life on basically every social network out there. Outdoor Hive is outdoor-hive.com. And it's a very, you can see all of our past newsletters that we've ever produced, as well as, the freshest one that happens to be there. You give us your email. We promised we're only going to send you 1 email a week, and it'll be on Wednesday afternoon. Nice and simple, and it'll come in. You'll be able to see everything. Even if you're not looking for a job, sign up for the newsletter, because at the end of the day, you'll get to see what everybody else is paying for specific roles. We tell people that all of our jobs are from the factory floor all the way to the C-suite. So I don't care if it's literally like sweeping the floor at the factory, or a supply clerk, or it is a CNC machine operator, or it's a marketing position, or it's a CEO position. We're listing all of the jobs because everybody needs a start in this industry all the way across the entire board. And then AGLOW is aglowOutdoors.com, and it's AGLOW outdoors.com. And like I said, we are the oldest hook and bullet content creating organization in North America. We want members all the way across the entire board. So if you're in the media and you are a professional media person, like you're making a couple of dollars doing this, or you want to be making a couple of dollars doing this, contact me, reach out to me. It's Kevin at aglowOutdoors.com. I'm happy to have talks with people. I want more media members all the way across the entire board. We are also bringing in corporate members to the organization, and we also bring in tourism members and nonprofits to the organization. Everybody in our entire organization, of those 4 groups of people, are treated equally. So when we go to our conference this year is going to be in Niagara Falls. It'll be in Lewiston, New York, literally 6 miles down from the falls. We are going to be fishing on the Niagara River, and everybody that goes to conference will get the opportunity to participate in that fishing tournament on Tuesday. It is probably one of the best freshwater fishing spots I've ever experienced in my entire life, because you can fish for sturgeon, salmon, steelhead, walleye, smallmouth, lake trout, brown trout. It's epic. And I took my 79-year-old mom there in October on a quick site visit, and we took my mom out fishing, and she caught an 18.5-pound lake trout and a 7-pound walleye and a 4.5-pound smallmouth, all in 1.5 hours. So pretty epic. If my mom can do it, our AGLOW members can as well. Our AGLOW members are basically probably 50% hunting and shooting guys and probably 50% fishing guys. And we cross that entire spectrum nationwide. We have one member that has a reach of 8.8 million every single Sunday in his Sunday paper, all the way to podcasters, television stars, all the way across the entire board. If you want to start media, this is the organization to be in. I tell everybody that it's all about networking. If you want to have success, you have to be in the room with people who are having success, and you have to spend belly to belly time with them, learn from them, and create those relationships so that your life can exponentially move forward. And that's the same whether you're going to a trade show, SHOT Show, you're going to a small conference at AGLOW, you're going to a small media camp. No matter what you do in your life to succeed, it's about creating these kinds of small relationships.
Kevin, thanks for coming on. It's good I think we run into each other once or twice, but good to meet you up front and in person. We'll see you down the road, I'm sure, in many, many other places, because I think the communications aspect of what we do is the most important thing conservation needs right now. I mean, we have things like open fields doctrine is under fire in many, many states where would cripple the officers' ability to do their jobs. We have organizations that are arguing that the $1 billion a year in PR dollars aren't really hunters' dollars because 80% of PR is by target shooters. We know that's not the case. Those people support hunting. We're not telling the message, telling the story that we need to be telling, and we're going to change that narrative because we all know who's pays for conservation. $1 billion in license sales, $1 billion in excise tax, all the money that goes to conservation organizations that, like you said, 10% off your salary every year, the conservation, that's a huge lick. And most people don't realize that. We haven't done a good job telling that story yet. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And just anytime you need anything out of us, we're a phone call away. So keep up the good work. Please elaborate on poach and pay as much as you can, because that and open fields, I think, are going to be the next two major challenges to conservation, is eliminating or reducing the poaching levels and keeping the officers the ability to go find the poachers where they are.
No, I appreciate that. And we're happily a resource. I mean, Hunting Life is certainly a resource for all of you. And, we hope you guys will be, coming to our AGLOW conference and participating in that, because, we're going to put you in front of 150, great media people all across the entire country and 250 members across the entire country and in Canada.
Yep. It's already on my radar screen now, because I'm doing the poach and pay circuit anyway. So it's might be a good time to do that. So to our listeners, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe if you would. Give us a thumbs up. That'll help us. It'll also let you know when our next episode is going to drop. Remember that sportsmen and women pay for conservation in this country to the tune of about $4 billion a year. And that without their efforts and without their dollars, we wouldn't have the clean water, clean air, and healthy wildlife that we have on the landscape today. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the woods or on the water. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.